Thank you, Sam. That was terrific. Next up is Gareth Porter, one of our best independent investigative journalists on U.S. foreign policy. His latest book is Manufactured Crisis, The Untold Story of the Iran Nuclear Scare, published by Just World Books. There's their table out there. Porter was Saigon bureau chief of Dispatch News Service International in 1971. Andrew Bacevich calls his book Perils of Dominance, Imbalance of Power and the Road to War, published in 2005, quote, without a doubt the most important contribution to the history of U.S. national security policy to appear in the past decade. Porter has taught Southeast Asian politics and international studies here at American University, with, as far as I know, no discernible impact on WAMU. Gareth Porter, welcome.
Thanks so much, David, and I especially want to thank David for giving me special dispensation to go a little bit, maybe far beyond the boundaries of the apparent boundaries of this topic. I do want to give my 1 minute take on news media and what is to be done, but then I want to go on to something much larger, which I think, you know, I have a message that is more applicable to the rest of the conference. What I want to say very briefly about the media, and by the way, I think Sam Husseini has done wonderful work. I think he's in a class by himself, and what he is doing needs to be done more by more people in support of the same kind of thrust. Having said that, I mean, you know, my take on the nature of the news media and the politics of war is that it is in the nature of corporate news media never, if it can get away with it, to accept any information or analysis or facts that conflict with the official line of the national security state, unless that line happens to be to the left of their line, in which case, many times, as Sam has correctly pointed out, the news media have attacked the White House and administration policy if it was not sufficiently hawkish for their liking. And so it is a very peculiar problem that I don't think we have adequately understood precisely why it is that way, undoubtedly multiple reasons. But in my view, it is important to continue this work of following the media critically, pointing out when it strays from the truth, and getting it out in whatever way is most efficient and most effective. But in the last analysis, it seems to me, we are going to make real progress in getting out the message of an anti-war position, not through the corporate media at all, and this perhaps is too obvious to even say, but by the anti-war movement itself having its own system of communication, which is most effective, which is more effective because the message is well honed, it is at least relatively unified, and speaks to the consciousness of the audience that it's trying to reach. And so that I will use as a segue into the part of my presentation that I wanted to really talk about, and David was kind enough to let me do this. I want to present to you a vision of something that has not been, as far as I know, discussed seriously for quite a while. A national strategy to mobilize a very large segment of the population of this country to participate in a movement to force the retreat of the permanent war state. All right, thank you. Now, what I've written here, what I'm going to read to you is, I know that many of you must be thinking, that is a great idea for 1970 or 1975, but no longer relevant to the realities that we face in today's society. And it's true that this idea, at first thought, seems to harken back to the days of the Vietnam War, when anti-war sentiment was so strong that even Congress and the news media were powerfully influenced by it. And we can all, not all of us, but many of us, shall we say, can think back to when that was true. We all know what has transpired over the decades since then to make what I call the permanent war state the new normal, as Andrew Bacevich has so well put it. Let me tick off 5 of the reasons that I know are obvious to all of you, but just to remind us of the situation that we face. First, the draft was replaced by a professional army, taking away the dominant factor in the surge of anti-war sentiment during the Vietnam era, or at least initially the dominant factor. Second, the political parties in Congress have been taken over completely and corrupted by the military-industrial complex and other powerful interest groups. Third, the war state exploited the 9/11 attacks to accumulate new, enormous powers and appropriate far more of the federal budget than ever before. Fourth, the news media are more warlike than ever before, I think is fair to say. We can argue that point, and that may not be as clear as the other points. Fifth, and I think in some ways this could be the most important of all, the powerful anti-war movement that was mobilized in this country and around the world in response to the U.S. invasion of Iraq was demobilized over a few years by Bush and even more so by Obama because of the inability of activists to have any impact on the policy of either administration. And I've talked to enough activists over the years to understand the process by which this happened. They saw that what they had been doing was making no difference, and they drifted away from the issue of war and peace into local issues, housing, race relations, and so forth. And this, therefore, is a problem of disempowerment, which we have to overcome. So you can all probably add more points to this litany of the problems that have beset the anti-war movement, such as it is in this country over the past few decades, which make the landscape, the anti-war activism landscape, seem so bleak to many people. I think it's pretty obvious that the permanent war state has achieved what Gramsci called ideological hegemony. Or is it hegemony? I'm not sure. I call it hegemony. And to such a degree that the first real expression of radical politics in generations, that is the Sanders campaign, was not willing or able to make that an issue in any important way during the campaign. Nevertheless, I'm here to suggest to you that despite the fact that the war state, with all its private allies, appears to be riding as high as ever, the historical circumstances are now perhaps more favorable to a frontal challenge to the war state than in many, many years. And I would cite 3 major fundamental reasons why this is the case. First, the Sanders campaign showed that a very large proportion, particularly of the millennial generations, do not trust those who hold power in the society because they understand that the powerful elites in the society have rigged economic and social arrangements to benefit a tiny minority while screwing over the vast majority, and particularly those generations of the young. Now, obviously, the permanent state, the operations of the permanent state can be convincingly analyzed as fitting precisely that model. And that, in my view, and I'm hoping to have some discussion of this that opens up a new opportunity to take on the permanent war state. Second, U.S. military interventions in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and elsewhere have been such obvious, disastrous failures that the present historical juncture is marked by a low point in support for interventionism reminiscent of the late Vietnam War period and the post-war period. That is the late 1960s to the early 1980s. Most Americans turned against Iraq and Afghanistan just about as fast as they did against the Vietnam War. And this phenomenon, this new degree of opposition to continuation of any U.S. military intervention made itself felt in 2013 when Barack Obama had announced that he was going to go to war in Syria. He was going to use military force against the Assad regime in Syria. And even in the face of overwhelming media coverage that encouraged that support, a Gallup poll in September 2013 showed that the level of support for the proposed use of force in Syria, 36%, was lower than for any of the 5 wars that had been proposed by the United States since the end of the Cold War. So we are here at a stage of evolution of public opinion which naturally has lost its taste for military intervention. Now, of course, that is far more true of big wars with ground forces than it is for drones. That's a problem. We have to face that. That's clear. But nevertheless, this is an opening that needs to be exploited. Third, and this, I think, could be, in a sense, even more important than the other two, the very obvious bankruptcy of the two-party system in this election, of both the parties, has made and will continue to make tens of millions of people in this country, especially young people, blacks, independents, open to a movement that connects the dots in the way that they need to be connected. So what I want to suggest is that with these favorable strategic conditions, as I've laid them out, in mind, it is time for a newly invigorated national movement to come together around a concrete strategy for accomplishing the goal which may have seemed impossible up to now of ending the permanent war state. And what I mean by that is to take away the means by which the permanent war state can carry out its intervention in foreign conflicts. What would that mean? I would like to cite the following 4 key elements of a strategy that I'm suggesting needs to be thought about, needs to be discussed, needs to be raised to the level of a national discussion. First, a clear, concrete vision of what eliminating the permanent war state would mean in practice is needed to provide a meaningful target for people to support. That hasn't been done yet. I know there's been a lot of work done on cutting military budget, opposing a lot of themes, a lot of functions of the military budget, but I still think that we could produce a vision of ending the permanent war state that would go beyond many of the useful work that's been done already and would provide that target which is so important to mobilize people. Secondly, a new and compelling way of educating and mobilizing people to action against the permanent war state. And by that I mean basically a new way or a refined way of communicating the message that the national security state, the organs of national security of this country and their operations really have no legitimacy. We need to delegitimize them. And I want to talk a little bit about that if I have a couple minutes left over at the end of this.
5 to 6 minutes.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you. Thirdly, we need a strategy for reaching specific segments of the society on this issue. We need to focus on those parts of the society which we have good reason to believe are open to this message. We need to have a strategy that focuses communications and organizing on campuses, on places and organizations where we can reach youth, young people, the millennials, and obviously linking up with those organizations that have flourished over the last few years around social justice need to be part of this strategy. And fourthly, we need a plan for bringing political pressure to bear with the aim of ending the permanent war state within a relatively short period of years. And folks, I want to tell you that one thing that I've decided is that I want to do this before I die. Now, I don't know how many years I have left, but I want to make sure that we do this before I kick the bucket.
All right.
So now I have a few minutes left, so I want to talk just for a few minutes about what I think would be the most useful approach to shaping a campaign message on the importance of ending the permanent war state. And again, I come back to the Sanders campaign as the experience that gave me hope that there was a way here, a new way to communicate the message. Because we know that the Sanders campaign appealed to a widespread sense that the political and economic systems had been rigged, as I said, in favor of the super rich. We need to make a parallel to that rigged system in the financial and economic policy systems to the permanent war state. Now, how do we do that? Such an appeal would characterize the entire system that makes and implements U.S. war policies as a racket. To put it another way, the permanent war state, the state institutions and individuals who push for policies and programs to carry out perpetual war must be delegitimized in the same way that those financial elites dominating the economy have been delegitimized for a large segment of the U.S. population already. The campaign should exploit the potent parallel between Wall Street and the national security state in terms of siphoning off trillions of dollars, not billions, not hundreds of billions, but trillions of dollars from the American people. For Wall Street, the ill-gotten gains took the form of excessive profits from a rigged economy. For the national security state and its contractor allies, who are in fact part of that state, that took the form of seizing control over money appropriated from the U.S. taxpayers to enhance their personal and institutional power. And by the way, I want to just add, when I use the term power, this is a key concept that, I have to say it this way, the left has never really gotten. The left is exceptionally attracted to the idea that the only issue that is a problem, the only problem really underlying U.S. imperialism is corporate profits. Well, that is a problem, no doubt about it. But we have to come to grips with the fact that we have we have the most powerful bureaucratic organizations the world has ever known at work here. And they have continued to appropriate more, not just money, but power. And power is important to these people. Power means to them that they can do whatever they want. It means that they have more to do it with. It means that they can affect more people. And if you want to understand this, think about the National Security Agency. Now, we have finally, from within the NSA, we have testimony from people who were at relatively high levels. Tom Drake was a senior official of the NSA, and he's come out. And Tom Drake understands, and I've talked to him about this at length, he understands that the motivation of these people at the top of the NSA was power. They wanted everything. They wanted to scoop up all information for its own sake. And that's a problem that is matched in all of the organs of the national security state, the Pentagon, the uniformed armed services, the CIA, the State Department, and the National Security Council, and those people in the White House who can use U.S. military power as a political ploy or as a political toy for their own power. So these are all part of the problem that we have to bring into the message. So in conclusion, we need to update General Smedley Butler's memorable slogan, wonderful slogan from the 1930s, "War is a racket," to reflect the benefits that now accrue to the national security establishment that make those war profiteers of the 1930s seem like child's play. I suggest the slogan something like, "Permanent war is a racket," or "the war state is a racket," or both. Why not use both? So this is the kind of approach that I think I would like to have discussed. And you know, if people see problems with this, this is a good time. This is the first time I've presented this publicly. I would love to have your comments, your reactions to the whole idea. And so I guess that's where I'll leave it right there. Thank you very much.